cloud. And I can do this one in English. It took me off as a co-host. Host. I'll host me. So I'm recording. I got the okay. Go ahead. I think I've got this one recording it actually.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And I'm going to share my screen.
Can I just remind you, Chuck doesn't have a screen, so it might be good to read what you're covering.
Good point, Christine. Could we, you want to go ahead and email the slideshow to him? Or you can email it to, yeah, it'd be just as easy to email it to him rather than one of us. Does anybody else not, like, is anybody else on the phone that maybe needs it to be emailed to them?
I'm just thinking reading it out loud before he talks about it, so that, because I don't think Chuck does both at the same time. Sorry, Chuck.
No, that's fine. If sometime after the meeting I get sent the slides, that'll be fine.
Sounds good.
Don't worry about getting them to me now and having me try to follow them on my own computer. That's silly. If I don't have the technology, that's my problem, not yours.
And hi, everyone. This is Jack with Congresswoman DeGette's office again. I can see the slides great through the mobile version, but it would be also great to have them after the presentation too. So thank you.
All right. Chris, are you ready to go? Where'd Chris go? Chris, are you ready to go?
Can you hear me now that
I
I'm?
can, yeah. Mhm.
So what's happening is when I share my screen, it's muting me. Let me try this again.
That's weird.
Chrome tab. Okay, now it's telling me I don't have access to the slides anymore. Oh, there we go. Let's try this one more time. Can you all hear me first of all?
Yep.
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I can't see because the thing is when I'm sharing, I can't see the screen. So now I'm going to do slideshow. And can you still hear me? Verbal
Yes.
confirmation. Okay.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
I can't see anything other than the presentation that I'm giving.
We don't have a
Well, we don't see the
presentation yet.
presentation.
Maybe Jesse can share and you can talk.
There you go.
Oh, microphone is disabled. Yeah, send it over to Chris and I'll show it.
Okay, let me try this one more time. I will try. It's in a locked Google Drive that
Oh, okay.
static one. So try it one more time. So you can hear me.
Far be it from me to explain why I don't have this technology.
Hmm.
Now we have the slides.
Mhm.
So I cannot share. I do not have permissions to share slides and talk at the same time.
Well, just talk.
Well, and can you give it to or email the slides to one of us and make us co-host and we can share our screens?
I'm going to put the link in the chat. I have them from a Google Drive from Shannon. I don't have them like statically. So let me try one other thing. And what I'm going to do is import. 1 second.
That doesn't work. Could you just talk through the slides and then send them to us later?
Well, actually, Janine is showing them on screen. So it's just a matter of following from Janine's.
Here we go.
There we go. Okay.
Go team.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for bearing with Janine and I. Ginny, do you want to start the slideshow or I can do this as well? It doesn't matter. All right, we'll go to slide 2. I'm going to get a quick overview. Janine, can you move to the second slide, if possible? Okay, so as you can see, an overview, what I'll try to present tonight is what is a community advisory group, what a CAG does and doesn't do, who should be a CAG member and membership, how are the regulatory agencies involved, and also how to appropriately evaluate a CAG's effectiveness, both in the community and with the relationship with the different agencies. So next slide. So obviously, as you can see, but I'll read it, Chuck, for you. A CAG is a representative group of community members and other stakeholders affected by the Superfund site. So here, a CAG is really formed for the VB I-70 Superfund site and concentrated on concerns, questions, and communications with ongoing cleanup within the site. So it's very specifically related to Superfund and not a lot of other issues outside of Superfund, though sometimes those just naturally crop up. So I do want to recognize that. And the KEG is also designed to serve as the focal point for the exchange of information among the local community and EPA, the state regulatory agency, and other pertinent federal agencies involved in the cleanup of a Superfund site. So really, a KEG is kind of a focal point for the agencies to meet with, community members or this community group, and then they bring community concerns to the agency regarding work at a site, and also the agency presents information to a KEG regarding our actions at a site. It kind of acts as a conduit of information sharing from and to the community. But it's also important to note that EPA has obligations on community involvement activities outside of the KEG, making sure the entire community is informed of our ongoing site activities. It's also important to note the KEG has also an obligation to share their actions and information to the broader community as well. Next slide, please. So the next slide is, why do we need exchange of information? Well, one, as you can see, there's this Superfund snake on the screen. It kind of shows all the different processes in the Superfund process and where community involvement is required. However, community involvement goes much further than just the requirements in the NCP. And I've never seen community involvement just stick to what is required. Community involvement goes on consistently at each site. And also, again, the exchange of information is really important so that the community can learn what the agencies are talking about. A common concern that we constantly hear from different communities that we work in is, Superfund, you speak a different language to us. We use a lot of acronyms, and that's understandable. So it's really, one, learning what those acronyms mean and how they pertain to our actions at a site. And then how do we learn to speak to the community we're in? No two communities are the same. Each community has different people, different backgrounds. And so really, when we're working with community groups, it's important to sit down and learn about those groups and how best to communicate them so that they understand our actions at a site. And as you can see here, you see a list of acronyms that we use commonly. And a lot of times, and I get, put in acronym jail a lot from this, is just saying NPL, PASI, TAG, RIFS, ROD, O&M. There's a lot in those acronyms, and even a lot in actually what the national priority list is, along with everything said there. So it's important to note that, one, you're learning from us, but we're learning from the community as well. Next slide, please. So what does a KEG do? A KEG provides, like I said, community members a forum to present and discuss their needs and concerns related to the Superfund decision-making process. And a KEG can assist an EPA in making better decisions on how to clean up the site. We take information that a KEG member or any member of the public sends to us regarding a concern on our cleanup, potentially something they've seen in the past at a site, provides us some potentially, great history of the site that we maybe have not taken into consideration or has been missing in some of our documents. We take all those questions and concerns very seriously when we respond to them. But it's also important to note that EPA is the decision maker when it comes to cleanups at the sites. That's not to say the input isn't well received. It is, and it doesn't, sometimes it may or may not influence those decisions at a site. So that's why it's always important as a KEG to either speak as one voice to the agency, but we also need to learn, as an agency, we also need to listen to other members of the community that might not be part of the KEG, or a lot of times some CAG members prefer to interact with the agencies one-on-one. Next slide, please. So other ways, or many ways, that CAGs can play a role in the Superfund process. So like I think I've stated before, is sharing institutional knowledge about the site and its history, providing comments at key decision-making points, such as the remedial investigation and feasibility study, which I said earlier is the RIFS, which in its very basic term is where is the contamination and how far is it spread from the original place that it was emitted from. And in the record of decision. The record of decision is memorializing our cleanup decisions at a site through what we call a proposed plan. Sharing knowledge about local redevelopment and planning with the agencies. I know that's been a concern and some questions from many of these CAG members, and it's much appreciated. So those discussions are really helpful for us to understand where a community might be coming from, but it also helps the community where the agencies are coming from as well when we're talking about redevelopment at Superfund sites. And there's been a lot of attention at Superfund sites and being redeveloped. And then serving as a forum during the operation and maintenance, promoting long-term stewardship of the site. Again, that's really important. Some sites, when we say operation and maintenance, where cleanup activities have been completed, but there's still the long-term monitoring done through 5-year reviews and other site monitoring plans that a CAG also might be interested and involved with. Next slide. So what doesn't a CAG do? And I hate saying doesn't because there's a lot, I think, things that CAGs do, but we also want to set expectations so that the CAG could be focused on what would be most beneficial to them and their communities. Like I said earlier, CAGs are not decision-making bodies. EPA by law is responsible for all the final decisions at a Superfund site. Again, that's not to discredit any of the information that anyone from the community, the CAG, wants to share with EPA, questions or concerns they want to share, which we will respond. And then CAGs play a key role in helping EPA make more informed decisions by providing an independent forum for communicating the perspectives of the local community throughout the Superfund process. And like I stated earlier, no community is the same and no CAG is really the same. There's EPA Region 8, I think we have 7 or 8 different community advisory group CAGs at various Superfund sites. They're not required by law at Superfund sites. There's a lot of sites that don't have community advisory groups or other means of community groups that help. They kind of serve as the same type of forum as a CAG as well. And if you have questions on those, I can get into that later as well. Next slide, please. So who should be a CAG member? Overall, the first thing to I think recognize is that CAGs belong to the community. EPA does not set up CAGs. CAGs are really set up by the community, and EPA can provide a variety of support along with the state or other local agencies to help them achieve their mission. So full community participation and representation of all viewpoints are essential to the success of a CAG. However, it's not practical for everyone in the community to be a member of the CAG. That being said, like you could have a CAG member represent, a broader group in which that CAG member would, traditionally take information to the CAG, present it to whoever that group they're representing, and it provides kind of that layered approach for involvement. That's not to say we don't want as many people participating as possible. Again, it's really important for CAG, there's a lot of time commitment and a lot of passionate time commitment that doesn't go unrecognized, at least by me, from CAG members that put in a lot of time, their energy, their expertise, and their passion into these kegs. You know, keg members are not paid, and we really appreciate all the time and effort it takes to host and put on these keg meetings. It just goes without saying that it's really nice to see that in terms of the concern and questions, you know, keg members have about the Superfund environmental concerns in their community. So memberships for kegs can include, you know, obviously the residents or owners of residential properties near the site, those who may be affected directly by site releases, those who may be affected by releases from the site, even if they do not live nearby or own a property near the site. Also includes environmental and other experts from local universities. I can get into how that's worked in the past at a keg I've worked on in Salt Lake City. And then representatives from local industry businesses within or near the site. Another important part on the membership, a lot of times we get, you know, sometimes an elected official will be a standing, you know, ex officio member of a keg, whether it be a city council member, county commissioner, any of those can always participate and be with, you know, in a keg, and it helps those elected officials hear the discussions that are ongoing with the keg, and then also can communicate directly with the keg one-on-one or to the agencies one-on-one if they have any questions or concerns as well. Next slide, please. So this slide is called How the Regulatory Agencies Are Involved. EPA and CDPHE, we don't direct the keg. Like I think I spoke to earlier, kegs belong to the community. To maintain the legitimacy in the community, each keg should operate on its own. The agency should be available to provide feedback and support to the keg when needed. Again, like I said earlier, the existence of a keg does not eliminate the requirement for the agencies to keep the community informed about plans and decisions throughout the Superfund process. So a lot of times while we work with the keg, there's other community involvement activities that we have to be involved with that stretch much broader than the keg participation. But that doesn't mean the keg can't participate in those broad outreach activities. And a lot of times we rely on keg expertise to help us on those broader community involvement requirements and outreach activities. And then we have a variety of keg resources, and I can speak to these more as well. We have technical assistance grants, which is a grant up to $50,000 for a, not so much, sometimes for community advisory groups, but for a community group, like a nonprofit, a 104c3, to hire their own technical advisor. It helps with the kind of storming and forming of the tag, and then helps to work with the technical advisor to provide input to EPA decision documents, technical documents, and then use it as a conduit to get that technical information distilled down to a level in which a community can understand what's in those documents, understand them, and provide questions and comments to the agency. We also have what's called a technical assistance services for communities, often referred to in our acronym language as TASK. It's similar to a technical assistance grant. However, it's a contract administered by EPA through an outside contractor, currently called SKIO, that provides technical assistance for communities, but not through a grant. So there's a lot less legwork through technical assistance services for communities for a KEG or a community group to access this. And again, the contractor provides, or EPA provides the contractor to the community, and the contractor really works independently of EPA, but works with the community group to figure out what the technical assistant needs are. And then when we have certain technical documents, they can help work with the community in distilling those down, and also helping draft either fact sheets, flyers, things like that, that the community think would be beneficial, or the KEG would think would be beneficial for a broader kind of outreach campaign to the rest of the community. So I've seen tasks used in a variety of communities really well, because it's really easy to use, and the expertise and the the resources they bring to a CAG or a community group are great. And I've always highly recommended it, but again, it's up to the community advisory group to choose what technical assistance, if any, they would like from the agency. Next slide, please. I've worked with Janine for a long time, so if I don't see please, I usually don't get what I need. Okay, so this slide kind of goes into elements of what an effective CAG is. And there's a lot of CAG guidance on the website. I can provide that information and links, but I think just because people also would probably most prefer it in email. So what I'll do is I'll take these slides and then get all the links, which includes kind of this slide, and email it to probably to someone who can provide it to the broader CAGs. I don't think I have the entire email distribution list. So Rachel, if it's okay, I'll email it to you and you can blast it out if that's okay.
Sounds good.
So kind of first off, the mission. CAGs have to be focused on Superfund related issues that have an impact on a community and transfer information from the community to EPA and vice versa. Kind of a two-way conversation. And we understand at times, you know, a CAG won't agree with us and we won't necessarily agree with a CAG, but at the same time, we want to always have that dialogue and making sure that, you know, we understand maybe the perspectives that an agency might be coming from or the perspective or a community might be coming from. Membership is also key. Membership of a community advisory group, they represent diverse interests of the community, and leadership selection and term limits are fair. So again, it's really like we stated earlier, CAGs really are community driven. The community owns them. So it's really important for the CAG to recognize that and determine that on our own. We won't interject in terms of that stuff because again, what the CAG is part of is the community, and EPA doesn't want to get involved in those leadership or those leadership selections. We can always provide advice or guidance on that, or answer any questions on that. Kind of going from the bottom on roles and responsibilities. CAG leaders agree to time commitment, ensure the board is focused and considers all sides of the issues. I think, like I stated earlier, the time commitment for CAG leadership is invaluable and much appreciated. Operations. So operations of a CAG provides public comments, regularly holds meetings, effectively uses facilitation and technical services if applicable. And I also say this, it's really up to the CAG to determine what services they truly want, either from the agency or they bring independently, such as their technical advisor here, you, Chuck. But we'll always check in to say, hey, what services can we help provide that would help you? And want to always consistently check in, making sure you are aware that those services are available, and then how to utilize them if you choose to go forward with it. And then the last thing I have here is documentation, which ensures site updates, meeting documents, CAG operations, and other information is accessible to the broader community. A lot of what I've pushed out before in terms of services that EPA can provide for a CAG can help with this documentation, and specifically meeting facilitation and bringing in a facilitator for CAGs, because a lot of times they can help provide a lot of this documentation and take the burden off CAG members, such as helping with the CAG operations, setting up the meeting invites, drafting notes, and then running those by the CAG members to make sure that, or meeting minutes, I should say, and then making sure that all CAG members agree that those meeting minutes are accurately reflect what happened in a CAG meeting. So those are all the slides I have. The next slide just says questions, and happy to take any questions, comments, either in the chat or live now, or I can just send this to you all and you're more than welcome to ask me, Ryan, or when he gets back, and Janine, any questions on CAGs you may have going forward. So thank you for this time, and I'm here all night. So that being said, that is the presentation on I have on CAGs, community advisory groups.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I don't know if we want to wait and have questions towards the end, or if we want to have questions now about this particular presentation. I know the next presentation is Jesse's going to kind of go over the Fox Island document and sort of what the process was of that. I know that we we had, I think that the Fox Island development, like that process of community engagement, I think we were using that as an example of how to engage and how to communicate with each other. But yeah, I think that what we really would like is sort of more hands-on, and instead of like institutional conversation about the pieces that we can read on the website, more so like what's the action that we can take here? Oh, Joan, go ahead. I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm
Then
sorry.
Christine, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Chris a question about facilitator again, and he probably went over it. Did I miss that, Chris, about a facilitator for a Superfund site like this?
What's the questioning exactly?
Is there a I apologize. I didn't make myself clear. Is there a facilitator already that has been chosen for this? I didn't note that was in your presentation about the opportunity to have a facilitator.
No, we've presented that option to the CAG board a couple times, and they said they'd talk on it. But if they, like they said, if they want to choose to have facilitation, it's up to the CAG to make that request clear, and then we'll go about securing or working to secure that facilitation.
Thank you.
Rachel, can I make a comment now? Because this is pretty upsetting to me to hear you outline. I mean, I feel very old listening to this. I have been on the CAG a long time, and I have been in Denver politics a very long time. And what I heard you say, and what I believe the new CAG policy of EPA is if people don't, like myself, don't live in the site, don't represent an organization that has an office in the site, which is probably most of us here. I mean, I don't know. They don't belong, but I guess that doesn't apply to agency people. They don't have to live there or really be familiar with the history or have read any of the blogs on Globeville or anything, really. You just have to be doing your job. But I am upset because I hear you saying you're going to privately communicate with people in the community and answer their questions, and there will be no record in the CAG of any of that. And I agree, EPA has an independent obligation to do outreach. I've never seen EPA do any outreach at all on the CAG. I don't even know if you've gone door to door in Globeville or if you've gone door to door in Swansea. I mean, I honestly question the EPA saying that they really want community input because you've never brought anyone in. Andrew Ross is on this call, and he remembers the meetings from 4 years ago where we would have 40 people in a room, and we had active participation, and they were very good meetings. And I honestly think this must be a national policy. I understand, and I asked you about this months ago, or I asked Ryan about this, but the EPA has adopted a new policy that says rather than focus on cleaning up to the utmost for people's health, the focus should move over to be more of a V cup. They should take it, the voluntary cleanup, take advice from that program and just try to get land back into production as soon as possible. And that has become the focus of EPA to the detriment of health. And that's what I think is going on here. So I wonder why any of us should come to the meetings. Is that EPA policy now? I've read it in 3 or 4 treatises. Get back in
there
production.
was kind of a lot there. So I mean, I kind of want to distill the question on V cup or your question on.
It's not
KEG
really,
membership,
yeah, I'm
or is it
just
comments?
confirming that is EPA policy. Therefore, we'll explain what we did at Fox Island later, but we need to get it back into production. Whether or not it's the best option for health becomes secondary.
That's not EPA policy. This is about brownfields. We discussed this at one of the previous meetings. The idea of brownfields comes from a long time ago. The site, brownfields comes from 2001 when it was put into law as an amendment to RCRA. So that's not something new. Redevelopment has always been part of the CERCRA process. So there is no new intention or idea that we are prioritizing one over the other.
Well, I respectfully disagree based on what I've read on the EPA website. And I really don't like this idea that EPA is now going to be the savior of the community and find people from the community and get them involved. I mean, it'd be great if that's what you were really doing, but you have never done it at this site, ever.
And that's the portion I disagree with you.
Interject real quick, because this site goes back to 2001. 2001, we did quite a bit. We had much more robust community meetings where people were involved. This came in afterwards. Sorry, let me see, something's going on here. This happened afterwards. This, as far as OU2, but to sit there and say that the EPA has not been involved on this is disingenuous. This goes back over 20 years, and there's been quite a bit of work going on. This CAG here has had some issues. Yes, we're trying to work through them, but you're making a lot of statements which are, I don't know what you're reading or what you're talking about. It'd be nice to show us what you came off of so they can read that, because that might be your interpretation, but I've not seen that interpretation. I've not heard that interpretation by the state. So I'd really like to hear where that's coming from to see what you're interpreting.
I will do that, but I will remind you that all of the ASARCO work was outside of the CAG. They didn't want to be done, included.
All of the ASARCO work outside of the CAG?
Well, it was
Really?
outside of Superfund. You took
but
that and cleaned it up.
We had monthly meetings the first year, then we went to quarterly meetings, and we went for after that we had a beginning of season, end of season. So that was, we've always had input there. So and I don't recall you being part of those things, because I was involved in that since 1993. So I don't think you were involved in those. So I'm not sure where you're getting your information from.
No, but I have been involved in the last 5 years of this CAG.
Yes, but you bring stuff from the past saying that they didn't do anything based upon your 5 years, and that's not fair. That's not a fair way to represent the CAG.
It's not clear what?
That's not a fair way to represent this CAG based upon your last 5 years. You're saying that at the very beginning they did nothing, which is not true.
No, I know you cleaned up ASARCO outside.
I'm talking about VBI 70 OU1.
Excuse me?
I'm talking about VBI 70 OU1, where you're saying nothing was being involved, which it was. The state was involved, EPA was involved. So are there some issues here? Yes. Are there people involved and stopped coming? Yes. Why that's going on, I don't know, but we're not trying to stop anything.
Okay, Joan, you have a question?
I just wanted to reiterate what Christina's saying, that we learned about the ASARCO globe because of the contaminated soil that was being moved from OU1 into the ASARCO globe site and used as dirt to cover up the site. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
So I think the just kind of to put some kind of packaging on it before we move on to Jesse's presentation. I think that one of the things that is frustrating is that, you know, when it comes to engagement, it seems like there's this really differential kind of power arrangement. And what that looks like is us coming to you with comments. You know, we have a public commentary. We come to you with public commentary, and or our public commentary is solicited. And, you know, we have Chuck and then Joan and Mary and Adrian and Christine, all are experts. And we will come to you and say, hey, we find some discrepancies here, and this is an inaccuracy. And we want to, you know, or this is what our public comment is, and this is what we know to be true in this community. And then that is sort of like, you know, it's listened to, I'm sure. You're here, I'm sure you're listening, but then it's not considered. And then we don't, and then things happen in the process. This is sort of what we were kind of anticipating learning about, is the processes happen, which are all, you know, put into law, like that's what's supposed to happen. Like, you know, you find a person, you know, find somebody to see what kind of contaminants there are, and you find somebody to clean it up. So, and then like talk to the community about it. That's pretty simplistic. But when we're commenting on it, we're actually trying to give commentary on it. It seems like the process will go as is, whether or not this community is engaged. And then on the flip side of that, you know, I appreciated that the first slide or first couple of slides said something about how there's some institutional knowledge, there's some, you know, some historical background that the community is really can provide and actually support your work in getting done in a better way that is more meaningful for this community. But that, you know, and I understand that Fonda early on had a lot of community outreach, but that hasn't been the case in the most recent years. And so soliciting the community for comment and for public, you know, for input on these cleanups hasn't happened in a meaningful way. And I also want to just add on that, as Christine mentioned, just going down there and talking to people off the cuff doesn't really help us at all, because we don't know who you talk to, or, you know, like the community advisory group, there has to be some record to give us some historical knowledge on this work. And so I think that's sort of where we're the most, we're just seeking the most information. And we're also seeking that the EPA, I understand that the final decision is yours and how the cleanup gets done or whatever, but what's the point in us giving you comment and for years? And I also can acknowledge that there have been times that we've kind of gone off, like talked about the environment in more broad ways, because that's how the environment works. You know, we can't put borders on soil, water, and air. But I understand that we've talked about things in a broader way. However, we don't even like the actual OU1. I understand that has since been delisted, but the OU2, OU3, all of these kinds of like really nuts and bolts of what's the next thing, what's happening next, how can we support the cleanup, how can we communicate this to the community, and how can we also be used as a tool for the EPA. That hasn't happened.
Let me jump in real quick. I'll say one thing. Talking about perceived EPA, not for EPA, I agree with you that we have not done a good job of communicating when you guys have maybe have had had made comments, and we probably didn't give enough explanation as to why we didn't, maybe, or disregard, not just disregard, but why we didn't feel the comments were valid or not. And I'll agree there. There's no question about that. But part of the problem also is that, when you have a site that's 20 years old and you've had multiple project managers, stuff like that, a lot of times things get forgotten and things like that too. So I think the best we can do is we can talk about the future. We can't change the past. We got to quit. We live in the past to say, okay, what do we need to do in the future? And I agree. In the future, we need to do a better job. If you guys have some serious comments about stuff that we disagree with, we need to sit there and explain to you in a better way why, if we disagree with you. I think that to me is we need to start from there. I agree. But to keep on talking about the past when it's different than it is now, that gets us nowhere. I think we need to continue talking about the future, but what's happening here and how we can solve that, because it comes off as being, in my opinion, it comes off as being, we don't trust you. Okay, about the past. Okay, fine, that was the past. Jesse wasn't the project manager. I wasn't the original project manager. So let's talk about how we can progress forward. I think the best way to do that is to be more clear as to why we may or may not agree with what your comments are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's really important.
And Rachel, I do want to kind of echo that, and also echo the point that you made is using the CAG as a tool to get information out and better utilizing your all expertise in helping us outreach. So, going forward, I'd like to kind of double down on that commitment, myself and Ryan, and kind of build on that and hopefully build that trust. Understood that it's lacking, but that we're here and help us learn from you all and what best helps you to get that information out. So, and also agreeing that we're going to disagree at times, but I really like how you said it is using, you all as a tool, and want to build upon that.
Great.
Rachel, this is Chuck. This is Chuck. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was waving my hand, but I guess you didn't see it. That was supposed to generate a chuckle.
I'm laughing, but I was on mute. Go for it, Chuck.
Chris brought up something that offered a segue to the question I wanted to ask, and he indicated that getting information out is really important, but my concern and my frustrations are more, how can the CAG get information into the EPA to influence what's being done? Because I see that as being a severe problem. So one question, Chris, for you, in terms of your view of exchange of information, is how do you envision a consultant with substantial experience and expertise getting, by means of the CAG and using the CAG as a tool for EPA to take advantage of? How, for instance, if the PRP or the consultants to the PRP are making a grotesque mistake, are basing decisions on how they're going to proceed on an interpretation that is simply and totally physically impossible, how do you suggest that be brought to EPA's attention using the CAG as a tool?
Sure, good question. And there's, I think, a variety of ways. We've done this before, and I think we're doing now. Obviously, you have one, if you know, just regarding the BFPBA recently, is the public comment period on those. Two, there are times, and sometimes it's appropriate and sometimes it's not, to bring the a responsible party to a CAG presentation to give their information and get feedback and provide kind of a respectful dialogue back and forth. And also sometimes written correspondence, for the record. Sometimes a CAG will send in a formal letter to EPA, and we would respond formally back to the CAG, and then we can have those discussions at CAG meetings and bring up the points of agreement and points of disagreement. I'm trying to think of some other, maybe not CAG related, or we've done this before, but work on a large site up in Montana where we work with the responsible party a lot of times in the community to provide joint presentations. But it just depends site by site. So those are kind of my suggestions, and I think that's what's been going on. But hopefully, kind of opening more of transparency in terms of where your concerns can be highlighted in certain documents, and highlight as concerns, and where we can say we'll take those in considerations. Or also, being very transparent, like, thank you, but we can't take those considerations because of X, Y, and Z, and hopefully distilling that out, I think, more in a layman's terms, or more in simplistic terms, so that a community can really understand what's going on. I think one of the big things, and you all know, is Superfund is just it's a behemoth of a process, and the laws and regulations that guide the agencies are tricky to understand. Heck, I don't even understand a lot of it, working, and I'm probably still a newbie within Superfund for 13 years. So recognizing that and trying those different avenues. And then again, my shameless plug of bringing up a facilitator for this CAG. I know it would be an EPA funded facilitator, but they can really help the CAG find their voice in terms of, this is what we want the EPA or the responsible party to understand, and bring those concerns, or bring the two, the CAG and the agencies together to kind of have this discussion, so that then, like a executive session, so that then we can present out at the broader CAG, any issues or concerns that either agency has as well.
Okay, so did you have a response to that, Chuck? Or we can kind of, I think that this is tangentially related to Jesse's conversation about the Fox development, and we can kind of move into that and go encapsulate on the other side. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, go ahead and let Jesse
Okay.
make his presentation. That's fine.
All right, cool. You're up, Jesse.
So Rachel, I think the presentation was about OU2, the co-op, not about Fox Island. You're on mute.
I thought, well, I understood we wanted to talk about OU2 as well, but I also thought that we were going to have a conversation about the comments that were made, that Chuck made on the Fox Island proposal, or the Fox Island community response. And remember, at our steering committee meeting, we talked about why weren't these comments included, or what, like, sort of giving us some understanding of what your thought process was on, like, this community involvement piece that you know, we were questioning like why the draft, we saw the draft, we gave the comment, and then the secondary piece, and then, you know, then we were thinking that we would get the finalized one. We were thinking we would, because they didn't reflect any of the comments that Chuck had mentioned. Either way is fine. I think that's fine, Christine. If we want to go OU2 and then go Fox, that's fine too. But yeah, but that was also part of our conversation. And then Chuck wanted to hear what he said, and then have for the next meeting, have some responses to that. Right? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, that's a different recollection from what I had, because the response summary, it's out there. That's the thing that we sent. So he wanted to know how is it that we respond to his comments. That was the response in his summary.
Well, I think that the issue was that there were substantive comments that were made by Chuck, and they weren't included, and we want to know why.
And that's what the responsiveness summary is for, to answer the comments that we received. So the responsiveness summary we sent in during the last meeting. So that's the response, the comments that we received.
I understand that they're in a document, but we wanted to hear them verbally and hear them discussed in a way that people in community can understand, not just in an institutional way.
Well, I can go and read them, and I don't know what else to, that is the response in the end. There's not much more to say than what's in the response.
Okay, we try this again, but what we would like is for you to explain why these comments, I understand they're in the response and I can go read them, but what we want is for you to explain it in a way that community can understand, because remember, that's been a really big issue. Community is talked over, or maybe doesn't have access to this document. And we wanted to have a verbal discussion about that so that we could reach some understandings.
Start then with OU2. I'll put up the document here and start working on something then. While OU2 is with the discussion, OU2 is going.
So for OU, no, we're talking about the Fox Island.
Yeah, I know that. What I'm saying is
Okay.
that there was the comment that we can start with OU2 and then move to OU3. So how we do that?
Well, mostly about the proposal or the draft summary, like that how that now the response is out there, like explaining this process to people so that they understand it. Like I feel like we're talking above people right now, and I don't like that. I want to be able to talk in a way that everybody's on the same page and understands what's going on. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm
really
not saying I'm not answering. I'm saying there was a suggestion that we could go with the OU2 portion of the presentation while I bring up the document and have something for you when OU2 portion ends.
okay. Sounds good. I just heard you say OU3, and I was like, I thought you were adding something else in there. Okay, that sounds fine.
I just took myself off mute. Can everyone hear me? This is Natalie.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to give a presentation on OU2. It should be pretty quick. Hopefully when I go to present, it won't. Oh, that is not the right video here. Let's see.
Where are you from, Natalie?
Hi, I'm from Colorado. So, well, not born and raised here, but I've been here since I was 13. My grandparents grew up in the mountains of Colorado, so it's home, Denver. And
what agency though?
I support the city, so I'm a consultant supporting the city.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to try to screen share and hopefully I won't lose audio. So let's try this first. Okay, did that work? It should be like a shadow picture.
Yes.
Okay, that's not the presentation, but I wanted to check that first. And then I'll pull up the presentation. And I think that should work. And everyone can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity to take a little of the CAG meeting time to present a status update on OU2 for the Vasquez Boulevard Superfund site. So like I said before, my name is Natalie. I'm an environmental engineer. I'm a consultant at Stantec. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering and many years of experience in environmental remediation. So I have experience from a research and academic perspective from the time I spent working at the Center for Contaminant Hydrology at CSU, as well as, you know, my experience in consulting through many projects, working on decommissioned oil refineries, former weapons and aircraft testing facilities, former mines. So those are kind of just some examples of my experience. And then regarding my involvement at this site, I've worked to support the project over the past couple of years on data evaluations and environmental reporting requirements for the OU2 portion of the site. And I think the city has a couple of folks that have joined today too, so I just will turn it over to them for a minute just to allow them to provide a quick introduction.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, okay, great. I'm Agatha Linger. I'm with the City and County of Denver, specifically Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment. We are the agency for the city that corresponds with EPA on this Superfund site. And we've asked Natalie with Stantec to prepare this presentation to go over where we currently are with OU2. So thank you for letting us have this opportunity to speak with you all.
And I'm Andrew Ross, also with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. I help Agatha.
Okay, with that, I'll just jump into this. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an update regarding the status of OU2 and kind of where we're at within the cleanup process. This is the agenda for the presentation. So the first topic is just a quick site orientation and background. I know that many of the folks on this call are likely already familiar with the site, but we do have a couple of quick slides to orient the group as to what OU2 is, where it's located, in case there are some folks that that background is helpful for, and then kind of just to orient the group. And then we will go over the general cleanup process for OU2 and where we're at within that process and discuss a general schedule and next steps. And then finally, we'll have some time, hopefully, for questions and discussion. The presentation's pretty high level and pretty quick and short, so it might make sense to hold questions until the end, but if clarification's needed to understand something that I'm discussing, please feel free to speak up. Okay, so this slide, this is a map of OU2. It's showing a bird's eye view. The OU2 area is delineated by the yellow line here, and it's located in the north central portion of Denver, about a mile east of the intersection of I-25 and I-70. So you can see I-70 here to the north, and then Brighton Boulevard here along this edge of the site, the southeast boundary, and then the South Platte River is to the west. The site contains the Denver Coliseum and its parking lot, and some other businesses in the northeastern corner, portions of the Pepsi bottling facility down in the southeast portion of the site, and then portions of the Globeville Landing Park near the South Platte River. So that's just kind of to orient folks about where OU2 is at and some of the features. So why do we care about this area? Why is it important? Why is it part of the Superfund cleanup process? So OU2 is the portion of the Superfund site that was the former Omaha and Grant smelter facility. It operated for approximately 20 years from the late 1800s to early 1900s. And this slide here is showing some historical photos of the smelter facility and the workers who worked there. So site impacts at OU2 are primarily related to the historical operation of that smelter facility. And for folks who may not be familiar with this site history, the smelting facility took ore or rock mined from the mountains of Colorado and refined it through heating to then extract valuable metals like gold, silver, copper, lead. And so as a result, the potential contaminants of concern associated with these historical activities are metals. And although metals are naturally occurring in the environment, smelting activities can leave behind levels that are elevated compared to what's found naturally in soil. So that's kind of the summary for background about the site. For this slide, this is just kind of presenting the general cleanup process that we're following at a conceptual level. And then I'll talk about where we're at with OU2 currently. So at the top of the slide, there's some questions that are typical for a site, and questions that are answered along the way as you move through the cleanup process. So is there a problem? What are the risks? How can it be cleaned up? How will the cleanup be implemented? And then finally, how will the remedy remain protective through time? And then underneath that in blue and this arrow here are the various Superfund EPA steps in the process, in the CERCLA process, that help address and answer those questions.
Can you, Natalie, I see this timeline. Okay, I was about to say, what are the dates on this? And you popped them up. Okay, perfect. We're on the right page. Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, good segue. So the first question, is there a problem, is a step to identify whether or not there's an issue at a site that needs further investigation. And that is referred to as this preliminary assessment / site inspection. And that was initiated for OU2 back in 1992. And then after that initial site inspection and assessment, it was moved forward by EPA in 1999 to the national priorities list, identifying it as a Superfund site. So that's shown here. To answer the next question, what are the risks? A remedial investigation and risk assessments performed. So the purpose of this step is, you go out and you're trying to gather information about the site to help understand and define what the potential risks are, whether they're human health risks, ecological, where they occur. And this step, basically it's with the goal of providing enough information to help support a decision regarding how to move forward with the site. So you're trying to collect information to then inform that decision. And the steps documented in a report format to summarize the findings of this investigation and risk assessment. And then once that, so there was a remedial investigation completed in 2009. And once that's completed, you move on through, the next phases. So to the feasibility study. And oftentimes, so the feasibility study is also like the RI, the remedial investigation. It's a document, and it uses information from the remedial investigation to develop and evaluate a range of different cleanup options to address the site risks. And then it's used by decision makers to then select a remedial action. The remedial investigation and feasibility study are commonly referred to collectively as the RIFS process. And as I mentioned before, the remedial investigation was completed, or there was a remedial investigation completed prior in 2009. However, since that time, several sampling events have been conducted within and near the site. So as a result, the remedial investigation portion of the cleanup process needs to be updated based on the additional site data. And so at the moment, OU2 is in this remedial investigation phase of the cleanup process to finish answering that question, what are the risks? I'll talk more about the specific steps that we've taken and plan to take to then complete this RI step on the next slides. But I just wanted to point out, I think there's a helpful quote from the EPA guidance on this RIFS process that I thought would be good to share, because that's where we're at in the the process of CERCLA, where we're at with OU2, and share that with this group, because I refer to it myself time to time when I'm trying to remind myself of what we're trying to achieve right now at OU2. And it reads, the objective of the RIFS process is not the unobtainable goal of removing all uncertainty, but rather to gather information sufficient to support an informed risk management decision. And based on all the work done prior to the 2009 RI and the additional investigations that were completed since then, we're really close to being able to meet that objective. There's just a few additional steps that we need to take to update the RI and then reissue a new FS. So before I move on to kind of talking about how we plan to complete the remedial investigation and update that, I figured it would be maybe helpful to this group to just talk about the remaining steps in the process, so you can kind of see how things will typically go at a site. So once the RIFS process has been completed, we need to kind of finish answering the question of how can it be cleaned up. And so what follows that is the proposed plan and record of decision. And that's where the cleanup approach is selected to finish answering that. And then the next question is, how will the cleanup be implemented? And then there's a design phase referred to remedial design. Finally, how will the remedy remain protective? That step, to ensure that it remains protective, there's long-term monitoring and a 5-year review process. So this slide here, it shows sampling of the primary sampling events leading up to the 2009 RI. And the purpose of this and sharing this slide is just to kind of show there's pretty good data density, and there was a lot of sampling that was done leading up to that report. Each colored mark on the figure represents a sampling location, and then the different shapes and colors are related to the different investigation that they're associated with. And then this was this is an example of the majority of the data that was included in that 2009 RI. And then this next image I'm sharing, it shows the sampling for the events that occurred after the 2009 RI. And so like with the last figure, each colored mark represents a sampling location, and the different shapes and colors are related to the investigation that they are associated with. The site data collected since the 2009, so this these sampling points shown here on this map, this has been reviewed and summarized in a report that was issued back in 2020, and through that process there was some additional sampling recommended. So this image shows the approximate locations for the additional sampling that's planned and detailed as part of the quality assurance and project plan report that is undergoing review at the moment. So you can see that along the top. It's also referred to as the QAP, as a shorthand for that. And so this is proposed sampling, and it's detailed in that report, and each colored dot on this map represents a sampling location, and the colors of those dots represent the type of media that's going to be sampled. So groundwater is blue, soil is red, surface water is green, and if there's more than one color, it just means both those media types are going to be sampled at that location. So like I mentioned before, we're really close to being able to update the RI. This sampling will be the last step prior to putting pen to paper to then update that document. So the anticipated schedule and next steps, in terms of schedule, the plans to conduct, well, first to finalize the QAP, so the report I mentioned on the previous slide, a quality assurance and project plan, and it's really kind of like a field document. It's meant for the folks that go out and actually conduct the sampling, and also has some guidance for, you know, standardized laboratory procedures that the laboratories will also use. So it's kind of a technical document and really targeted to procedures that are going to be followed both in the field and in the laboratory to execute that sampling. And so the hope is to get that finalized and then move forward with executing the sampling starting later this year and going into 2023. Groundwater sampling will occur quarterly for the period of 1 year. So for example, if we start in the third quarter of this year, sampling is anticipated to be completed in the third quarter of 2023. And then if that schedule's followed, then in 2024, early 2024, there would be a revised RI report that would be issued that would incorporate the additional information that we collect from this sampling that we're going to be doing. So I apologize if I went through that too quick, but I knew we were short on time. So if there's questions and discussion, I'm happy to kind of open it up to the group now. And
I wrote this in the chat, but I just, for Chuck's edification, is there anything different in what you presented from the report that he chimed in on and gave feedback on?
Can you repeat your question?
Well, our technical expert made suggestions to Stan Tech's proposal, I don't know, maybe a year ago. He can say, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that's been updated that would show up on your map.
Yeah, we received those and reviewed them. And I believe, Jesse, there was a response to those from EPA, correct?
So Natalie, if I can interject, this is Agatha. I think, and Christine, please do correct me if I'm wrong. I think, are you referring to the technical memorandum that did get finalized last year?
Yes.
So that is a different document. That document had been finalized. The plan that Natalie presented on is, I think Chuck might be correct, or was presented to the CAG maybe last month. And Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right. This is the QAP that I sent last month.
So I think we might be referring to different plans.
Okay, so Chuck has already seen what Natalie presented and discussed it with CAG, and I must have missed it. Is that correct, Chuck?
Christine, this is Chuck. A year ago, roughly, I don't remember when, there was a scoping document that was setting up what this new RI program would look at. And we were given a now becoming familiar opportunity to comment on one of the draft versions of that document. I did offer comments I don't believe that those comments generated any change from the last version of the scope that I saw. So I believe that what Natalie is showing today is the same. However, you did not miss anything with respect to a discussion of this document for reasons because it has never been before the CAG before, for reasons I'll go into a little bit later on some comments I have.
Okay.
But I think the answer to your question is these are the same sampling points for the same media as the draft scoping document for the RI had in them.
Okay, that's what I was trying to ask. And there's so few sampling points compared to the ones that have been done historically that I'm sort of surprised. What are there, like 15? And I don't know how that's enough. So that's one question.
You have a question of why there's, oh. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, but feel free to answer Christine's question. I do have one for Natalie as well, but go ahead and answer Christine's.
So your question, I'm just going to repeat it back to make sure I understand, is why there's fewer samples than historically?
A ton. I mean, you showed the map that had probably 100, 150 sampling points.
Right, yeah. So temporally speaking, we have all this data already. So that map I showed that had all those sampling points, we still have that data and it's still valid and it's still used in the RI. So we're supplementing it with this additional data. The soil's still there, you know, like the soil samples that we're taking are in addition to the soil samples that were taken before. And so everything's going to be used collectively. It's not like the 2009, the data that was used in the 2009 RI is going to be replaced with this new data. It's all looked at collectively as one big picture. It's in addition to. So
and there's no new contaminants that showed up in the 20 years since these studies have been done that should be looked for.
So additional sampling has been done to show there was an updated report showing the investigations that happened after 2009. And so there, I think, was some updates to different constituents based on the, you know, that's part of the whole update is looking at the sampling that was conducted after 2009 RI, and then going out there and supplementing that in addition to ensure we have completed characterization of the site.
Okay, I'm just confused because I know that certain things, radionuclides, for example, weren't looked for. Certain things were never looked for, and I don't know if they're going to be looked for in this new proposal. And I don't know if if some of the other contaminants, I don't really know, but say arsenic or lead, the standards are becoming stricter. Will you look a little more based on the new standards, or are you going to use the number from prior to 2009 and assume that that level of arsenic is still there? That's an example. But
I'll help Natalie with this one. I think that we would defer to EPA's decision on what standards we should be comparing the data to.
So that's a really good, like, I'm confused because I think Christy put the question in the chat, like, where have you been for 2 years? We haven't seen any of you in these meetings. And when did it, like, I'm confused about, so 2 years ago, Natalie, you were brought on as a consultant. And so we haven't been communicating with you all as a CAG. And so there's no CAG for the department or the Denver Department of Health and the Environment. CAG for that. I mean, are we the CAG, or did you create a new CAG to help inform your decisions? So first and foremost, you said that you're a consultant. Are you paid by the city or by Stantec?
I work
Natalie.
for Stantec as a company. So
You work for
we are
Stantec.
yeah, we're a consulting company. So we're
The city and
engineers.
county of Denver contracted Stantec for their professional consulting.
Understood. So how did that leap from the EPA over to the city and county of Denver, then to now? You know, I understand Stantec was the consulting firm, but where's the oversight on this? I'm really confused about how now it's a Stantec consultant who's giving us this information. And I mean, like, and also, this is the first time I've seen you, Natalie. And I would have assumed that Jesse, the person we've been conversating with and had, had these issues with communication with in the past, that he would be the one presenting this information to us today. So I'm just, and I see new faces, and this is sort of a good example of how community gets real disengaged real quick, because all of a sudden there's strangers that we've never seen before. And in our community, as in particular, there are people who may be undocumented. And once you see a whole lot of official folks, it's time to leave, and they don't feel comfortable in being here and communicating. So that's sort of where I'm at. Like, I'm really confused about how these things got handed over, and now you're the people here today.
Hey, Rachel, if I may. So there were a lot of questions. I can field a couple of them, I think. So I work with the city and county of Denver. The city and county of Denver was identified as a potentially responsible party for operable unit 2. And as the potentially responsible party, what that means is that we are leading the investigation. We're a large owner of the site. So the city and county of Denver owns the Coliseum portion of the site. We don't own, and the park. We obviously don't own those businesses along Brighton Boulevard or Pepsi bottling facility. But as the PRP, the potentially responsible party, we've retained Stantec to help us with the work. So just like we did in the 2009, back then, the consulting firm, their name was EMSI. They're no longer a business, but that's just a standard practice that we would retain professional services to complete the work. And then as the potentially responsible party, we then have obligations to then report to the EPA. So there's no change in process. It's the same process that it has been back when we did this effort in 2009.
So I'm going to just ask the city people, and I guess Jesse, but I don't want to be blindsided like we were at Fox Island. Is there a potential purchaser that may take over the Stantec, the cleanup, the RI that you're outlining and here that we do not know about? Is there some negotiation right now?
Stantec is the consultant. There's no cleanup. I guess you're mixing stuff in there. Stantec is just a consultant to the city to get information.
Christine, the city-owned portion of OU2, which is the Coliseum and the Coliseum parking lot, there is no possible way that the city will ever sell that property.
Thank you.
It may be redeveloped after the Superfund process is completed, but Agatha and I are not invited to those conversations anymore, so I can't tell you what exactly is being thunk by the mayor's office these days. As you probably know, they still want a new stadium for the stock show, even though the voters voted it down. But like I said, we're not privy to those conversations.
That's what I want.
And as far as where we've been, Agatha and I both work for the Department of Public Health and Environment. We were redeployed to COVID duty for 2 years. Excuse me. We were specifically told by our management to not participate because we were focused on COVID. During that time, we received some pretty drastic communications from former members of the CAG that were unfortunate in nature, but a little bit alarming. And we decided at that point that we were going to disengage a bit. And we wrote a letter to the administrator at the time and said that we would only participate if EPA asked us to. My understanding in talking with Fonda is that those folks are no longer part of the CAG. So we will try to attend going forward, but I don't know if we'll be here every time. We are very short-staffed, and there's a lot of things happening in the city, as you probably everybody can see as you drive around. But you can always give Agatha or I a phone call, and we will tell you what you know, what we know.
Yeah, and just to add, Rachel, I hope you have gotten my emails. I have responded. And our presence, I certainly don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or feel like this is a space that they can't talk because the city's here. So, but thank you for letting me know that we may make people feel uncomfortable or unwilling to participate. So just want to ensure that that's not our purpose, isn't to, it's, as I think Chris said earlier, to share information and hear the community.
Yeah, it's just tricky because we say we want community and now there's only 3 community people, if you count me, which you probably won't, on here now, because I guess they all left, I don't know. So it's really hard.
Hi, this is Adrian. Can I ask a quick question before I forget the dates that you put out there? I think it was 2009, 2010, and then you jumped to 2020. So is there a 10-year gap there with nothing happened, or what was that?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse can probably answer it better than I can, but the site was just not a priority for EPA, and the city at the time felt that that part of Denver was not going to redevelop quickly, and the exposure pathways are limited or negligible from OU2. So because of the asphalt cap on the parking lot. So,
but the data you have is from 2009 and 2010. Is that right? So if there was an aquifer underneath, then all the sampling that you've done now is become pretty much obsolete because whatever was underneath there is spread out. So you say you're going to do further sampling, but only at certain sites. But from the first slide you showed, there were multiple sites. So that was one of my questions. The other question is, who actually does, you mentioned the lab. So I'm a scientist. So I just wondered who actually does the sample, who actually does the analysis? Is it the EPA or is it the CDPHE, or do you send it out to contract labs? Or where do the samples go? Is there a contract lab for the contractor?
Hi, Adrian, this is Agatha. I can help answer that question. So, and just to clarify, there has been data collected since 2009. So those 2009 dates are when the respective reports were published, but data has been collected before and after those dates. And so now this revision is going to be consolidating everything into one picture. And then with respect to who is performing the sampling, so the City and County of Denver is the PRP responsible for completing the remedial investigation, and we have hired Stantec Consulting to complete that investigation for us.
So they have their own labs. Is that what you're saying, Stantec does?
No.
So
no,
what is the name of the lab? That's what I'm getting to. What is the lab?
I'm
Is it in Denver, or are you sending it out, or where is it going?
So Stantec is going to be the boots on the ground, the field, collecting the samples. And then Natalie, I'll kick it over to you if you want to say who the laboratory is. And I do think that that's described in the plan that is currently in review, the QAP.
It's Eurofins.
Eurofins, okay, I know them. And then the other question, this is the last one. Do we get to see the actual results of the data from 2019, 2010 to 2022? Will we actually get to see the numbers of, and this is going, and this is kind of like a double faceted comment or question, going back to Jesse's presentation about a month or so back when he was mentioning Superfund sites and saying that you could only analyze for those compounds. So I'm assuming that you're going to be looking at lead and arsenic and cadmium and mercury, but nothing. Well, I mean, there's a list of elements of metals that you will analyze for, but you can't analyze for anything outside of that, is my understanding, because it's a Superfund site. And so what my question is, will you be giving us the data from 2010 and 2022?
Yeah, the data is in that 2020 report that we were talking before.
Yes.
It summarizes all the data from 2009, and the data was collected since then till 2020.
But there's going to be new data.
No.
My understanding, that's what, isn't that what Natalie just said?
Adrian, there is a what we call a technical memorandum that summarizes all of the data that we've collected until 2020. And now we're going to collect additional data that will supplement all of the data that we have over the years.
And we're going to see that. We are going to see that, right?
Yeah,
can we see that? I mean, you haven't done it yet, but can we see
that? I'm sorry, Adrian, the data that has been collected to date has been memorialized, as Jesse indicated, in the technical memorandum that was finalized, I believe last year.
Can we get a copy of all of that then?
You have one, Adrian.
I think it's posted on CDPHE's website.
I can send it.
Yeah, it is
Will you
posted
send it to me?
and available.
Okay, send it. If somebody could send it to me, I'd really appreciate it. If it's in table form, it's fine. If it's a PDF, I can't do anything with it. But if it's in graph form, I would appreciate it. So that was my comments. Those are my questions, and thank you so much.
And Adrian, so this the data will be summarized again, and including the new supplemental data that will be collected during this year and next year. That'll also be summarized in the remedial investigation report that's forthcoming and will be prepared after the sampling is completed. And that is also public.
Janine, you have a question?
Yeah, we try. Oh.
Yeah, I did have a question for Natalie. I was curious about. It's been a while since I looked at the scoping document, but I don't think I noticed in it a post Globeville Landing construction site, post that construction map of the hydrologic flow at the site, and I notice there is one in the crop document. I'm getting a horrible echo here. Are other people hearing that?
It seemed to stop.
It's okay now.
Okay. Let me take it off. Anyway, so my question, Natalie, is that map that's in there appears to be similar to maps that have been being generated by Denver from their Globeville landing data and surrounding data. Is that the source of that map?
The map I shared today is within the QAP document.
Right. And
So it
is
has some
that
groundwater. It identifies, what I shared is it identifies locations of additional groundwater sampling at wells that are existing, but also some new wells that we'll be putting in. And then where we are placing the new wells, there'll be soil sampling conducted. And then there's some additional soil samples outside of that, and then surface water and sediment
Natalie,
sampling.
I think Chuck might be asking about the slide that was included, showing the map of the historical samples collected. Do you recall?
No, the map I'm specifically interested in and the issue is the new groundwater monitoring wells. Was their locations in part determined by the flow field represented on that Denver map?
The flow field represented on what Denver map, Chuck?
The one that has contours and flow areas, flow arrows on it.
So the
It
groundwater gradient has been mapped with some of the reports we've generated. So we have an understanding of the groundwater levels at the site. What we've done is have groundwater locations and sampling placed up gradient and then cross gradient. So within the site, and then down gradient. So down gradient
Okay.
of the site. So you kind of have a picture of what are we seeing? Is there something flowing into the site? What are the conditions beneath the site? And then do we have anything moving off site?
Okay, and you mentioned maps you had generated. The map that I saw in the QAP, and I wish I could tell you what number it was, but it was identified as being related to monitoring that was being done by Denver, maintenance monitoring in the park area and the outflow area. And it looked like a reproduction of perhaps the 2019 map from their monitoring report.
Mm-hmm.
And is that map that's in the QAP representative of the flow field that you use, Stantec used, to help locate the new monitoring wells?
Yes.
Okay. And did you independently verify that map? Or
I
did
don't know.
someone at Stantec? Or did you just accept it from the reports that Denver produced?
The groundwater levels that were measured, that data was looked at, and that's what was used. So groundwater level data was reviewed and those maps were generated. And so review of those maps, review of the flow conditions, and review of the groundwater levels that had been measured at the site is what helped inform placement of wells, and also just an understanding of what historical data has shown at the site as well.
Right. But the map in the QAP and the reference that's cited in the reference section of the QAP identify the presented interpretation on the map as being City and County of Denver's monitoring. And I'm wondering
The
if...
source of that data, it's not something that was collected by Stantec.
No, I understand that. I'm talking about the interpretation of that data. The contour patterns and the flow direction arrows. Is that something that Stantec accepted from Denver? Or did Stantec go back to the wells and contour it themselves?
Chuck, just to clarify, this is Agatha Linger, DDPHE. So I think you're referring to the data that another consultant of Denver's collected, Apex, for the Globeville Landing outfall environmental, monitoring and maintenance plan. And we continue to do that monitoring. And now Stantec is completing the annual monitoring.
But is that the Apex interpretation of the data, or is that Stantec's interpretation of the data?
It would be helpful to know the specific figure you're referring to. I think I know, but to pull the report up and sift through it right now, I don't have that. You know, I think we're towards the end of our time as well. But
that's fine. That's fine. If you knew, that was the only question I had.
Adrian, do you have any follow-up questions on that as well? Okay.
I can't get my phone off mute. I'm sorry about that.
No, go ahead, Adrian.
I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback as well. No, I think Chuck explained it better than I did in terms of the mapping, and those were my only comments. So, and since I'm getting a feedback, I'm going to leave it there. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Chuck, did you have something else that you wanted to follow up with? Okay, guess we're good. Christine, did you have anything else? Did you have any follow-up questions?
No, but thank you for checking. I'm just, you know, I've read when I was doing a lot of the work on that quote critical time action for CDOT to do the drainage. I read a lot of the reports that went into the 2009, and I used to know the stuff, and I'm kind of lost now about, I remember it was a water issue that prompted further work, further remedial investigation, if I'm not mistaken. But somebody else jumping in. Anyway,
there was need to collect additional groundwater data, and that's why we're having this updated RI.
I think Janine had her hand up. Go ahead, Janine.
Yeah, I keep trying to find a way to communicate here without blowing everybody out and sending them into some time warp. What I was trying to say is that if Adrian needs information, or any community member needs information in another format, he said he has a hard time with PDFs. And if he wants to see data, it's not necessarily something that works on a PDF, depending on how it was generated in the first place. So what I was suggesting is that whoever that may be, whoever, Adrian or anybody else that needs it in another format, just needs to contact the agency, so that the agencies, one of them, pick one, so that we can make the information available in another way, maybe on the cloud or whatever. But I do it all the time with huge engineering reports or engineering drawings, because they're just too big to put on the website. And so I have a caveat on my web pages that says, please contact me if you need the drawings. That's all.
Let me just say, this is Adrian again. Let me say this real fast. The only reason why I didn't want a PDF is because I can't unlock it. I have, I'm retired, so I don't have any mechanism unlocking those. So if I get a PDF, I mean, I can eyeball the numbers, but I always like to do graphs. I like to look at graphs because they tell a bigger story than anything else, and I can't graph from a PDF, and that's the only reason why. Thank you.
And then I do have one more question. I might have missed this, but I think I heard there is no opportunity for Chuck or CAG to weigh in on the, what are you calling it, the QUAP? That's just in EPA's hands now? And am I correct on that? And if so, when is EPA going to look at it? And
Christine,
the QUAP
Christine, let me take this, Jesse. The QUAP was distributed the day after the last CAG meeting. And the deadline for getting comments back to EPA is tomorrow. So there was a 30-day period that did not give the opportunity to present my assessment of the QUAP to the CAG for its consideration and how it wants to respond, would have wanted to respond to EPA. I'm toying now with whether or not I'm going to bother to send EPA a hurried and abridged version of the comments that document deserves. It's the same procedure that was used for the scoping document. It's the same time frame and procedure that was used for the Fox Properties document, where there was never time to present a assessment to the CAG as a body in order to let the CAG make a decision of how it wanted to deal with it. In those other two cases, I went ahead and just as an individual responded to EPA and got blow-off responses in both cases. It may be because I was too terse and not able to take the time to make the position clear. I don't know. But based upon the answers to questions I've gotten tonight and presentations I've listened to, I am not going to do that again. I will carefully develop my comments and my recommendations. I will provide them to the CAG so that the CAG sees and understands what I see and understand. It probably then will be too late for the CAG to influence the QUAP or anything that is any data that then is developed from implementing the QUAP. There will also be water over the dam, but it's time to stop this nonsense of talking out of one side of your mouth how much you want involvement from the citizenry and the CAG and any experts that the CAG have in a time frame that precludes the ability to do that. So it may be it's just building a set of reports and data that somewhere down the road may fuel a lawsuit or something, as opposed to making the Superfund process work better. But the persistent pattern and practice that's been being done, along with the differences that the EPA has put in their new CAG guidelines compared to the old CAG guidelines, which I hope to have an opportunity to discuss with the CAG tomorrow, means I'm not going to play the game anymore of trying to cooperate with the EPA, trying to work on a time frame that, as somebody who's got a working life and am doing volunteer work, and thinking that I can do in 30 days part-time by myself what the agencies have been working on for 11 months on this QAP. The QAP was issued June 30th of last year. There's been one revision that was done, and the results of that revision were put out 4 months ago, and EPA sat on it for 3 months, didn't mention it at last month's CAG, sent it out without announcement by email to people, some of whom didn't even realize they'd received it, and then have the cutoff date the day after this month's CAG. That's untenable, it's unusable, and I will continue to consult to the CAG, but I'm not going to do it under those conditions and include EPA as a courtesy. I will be working for the CAG, and I'll leave it up to the CAG whether or not they even want to share what I develop with the EPA.
That's pretty distressing. Thank you, Chuck. It's just makes me wonder if EPA is not accomplishing precisely what it wants to accomplish tonight, which is render us impotent.
I'm not going to pretend to assess why they're doing what they're doing, but I am not going to play it that way anymore. And if grotesque mistakes, oversights, and errors end up in this process because they don't want to hear, then ultimately they're the ones that also are going to have to answer for it. But I see lots of high sounding language that's not matched by behavior that allows that language to work. So with that, I have no more comments to offer.
Thank you, Chuck and Christine and Adrian, for sticking around past our time. And I will just sort of completely support my community members here in saying that, you know, we all have full working lives, and this is something we do on our own time for free. And I can't imagine, you know, a commute. And again, I've begged you to please start speaking in a way that the community can understand, and to have conversations that don't go over everybody's head. And I'm just like, again, I'm still sort of like, okay, well, if a community member who isn't an expert was sitting in this meeting, we had Mary in here earlier, but you know, somebody who was like in like the Adrian is a rare unicorn, but is a scientist, they'd be lost. So at the bare minimum, we need to I'm just very discouraged because this isn't a community meeting. This is I don't know what it is. I don't know if if you're checking your box, but maybe that's what it is. And you know, the only thing I could think of, like, I understand that there's been a facilitator offered. I don't know, but I feel really, really defeated and triggered right now. And I feel like my mental health is not going to be sustained being in these meetings for much longer. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from Chuck tomorrow in the next few days, and we can talk with him and Adrian and Joan, I know our other expert as well, like bringing folks in here and like talking about what we want to do for next steps, because this is not what I can even envision to be a community advisory group meeting and a community engagement. All right. So I look forward to everybody's slides coming to me, and then we can work on, or, you know, your documents, so that I can work on trying to get them on the cloud so that can be more accessible as well. And we still have our steering committee meeting next month. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Is it
What?
tomorrow, our meeting, this Wednesday? Because Chuck was saying we're gonna meet tomorrow. Is that?
I
the-
think he was gonna provide comments for us to talk about tomorrow, like maybe,
But when is
right?
our?
No, there is a steering meeting tomorrow.
oh, there is a steering meeting tomorrow. Okay, so I guess we'll talk about it then. Agree, is that what you were thinking, Chuck?
There's that VVI.
No, what I was telling Jesse was he will not be getting abbreviated or quick comments from me. And if that means it's past the deadline and he approves a clap that he'll regret down the road, so be it. But I will offer my comments and I will make them public to the CAG.
Okay.
I would just say that the CAG steering committee meeting is on June 7th.
Okay, that's
So,
what, okay.
Yeah, so whatever
Wait.
they have to, yeah, tomorrow is the other, getting the comments from Chuck tomorrow, I believe.
No. There is a community steering meeting tomorrow. The VVI Senate steering meeting is tomorrow. It was
Well-
set up the week after the original date of today's meeting. That was last week. And I have not received any notice that has changed.
My calendar is
I have it on my calendar for the 7th.
the 7th.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what
someone
my
changed it,
calendar
it's only
has.
then.
I'll ask Shannon to clarify that for me when she comes back, but I have it on my calendar on the 7th. I think you're on this, I'll be sure. If
Mine
you're
does
not, I'll
also
put
the
you on
7th.
it. Yeah. You're on it, you're on this invite, check the 7th. That might just be a residual appointment date or something.
Goodbye all.
Yeah, it is easier to have it.
Thank you for your efforts. We'll talk on the 7th. Ponder some of this, and I have some thoughts about how to further clarify what we're doing here. But everybody have a nice holiday, a nice safe holiday, and stay healthy, please.
You all too.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.